Chapter 9. Marian skirted the beach, keeping a wide berth from the castle and its surrounding village so as not to be spotted by any guards. When she had walked far enough away, she switched back, heading to the road that led to Robin's ancestral home. It wasn't far from the castle, bordered by the ghostly woods of Sherwood Forest. Marian felt her pulse quicken as she approached her destination. She hadn't seen Robin in 3 years. What would he say when he saw her? Would things feel the same between them, as if no time had passed? Or would they be different now? Would he be different? After all, war could change an animal. It could harden his heart. What if Robin had lost the feelings he once had for her, while she felt them just as strongly as ever? No. She shook her head. She couldn't think that way. This was Robin, after all, her best friend, the one who cared about her more than anyone else in the world. He'd made a promise to her that night in the castle garden, and Robin always kept his promises. She rounded the bend, reaching the outskirts of the estate. The beautiful manor home had been in Robin's family for generations, not to mention a home away from home for her as a child. She and Robin had spent many happy hours frolicking on the grounds or sneaking into the kitchen to steal honey cakes when the cook wasn't looking. It was always a happy time at Locksley. Her eyes lifted, and she frowned. The home stood where it had always stood, but it was not the stately stone structure she remembered. Instead, the building was in contempt, as if it had been abandoned for a good time, and the grounds surrounding it, always meticulously maintained by the many gardeners employed by the family, were now outgrown and strangled by weeds. She frowned. What was going on here? Robin's mother would never allow her gardens to look like this. Robin's father would never allow his estate to crumble. Had they also become victims of Prince John's cruel taxes? Had they been forced from their family home? And if so, where were they now? Where was Robin? Was he all right? Worried, she picked up her pace, weaving through the tangled gardens and towards the manor house. When she reached the front door, she lifted the heavy iron knocker, her heart filled with a trepidation. She dropped the knocker against the door, once, twice, 3 times. There was no answer. She tried again, waited, but still no one came to the door. She tried to tell herself not to think the worst. They could be out for a stroll, at the market shopping. There were 1,000 reasons they might not answer. But still, she couldn't suppress her rising fear. She tried the door handle. It was unlocked. Drawing in a breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside the home. "Robin?" she called as she entered the foyer. "Are you here? It's me." Her voice trailed off as her eyes adjusted to the dark room, horror falling from her like a heavy cloak, threatening to suffocate her. The elegant estate she remembered from childhood now looked like a war zone. The place had been ransacked. Tables were tipped over, drawers upended, precious books torn apart. "Oh no," she cried. "No, no, no." She heard a shuffling around coming from the next room. She swallowed hard, willing herself to stand her ground. "Hello?" she called out again. "Is someone here?" 2 figures stepped into the light, black feathered vultures dressed in purple cloaks. One wielded a crossbow loaded with an arrow, and the other carried a sharp-looking axe. They stared at her for a moment, then raised their weapons. "Who are you?" demanded the first vulture. "And what do you think you're doing, trespassing in this here place?" snarled the second. Marian took a hesitant step backwards, her whole body shaking with fear, but she forced herself to square her shoulders, to lift her chin. No, she was the niece of the King of England. She would not cower in the face of these 2 scavengers. "I should be asking you the same question," she replied, working to keep her voice even, austere. Who are you? And where are the owners of this estate?" The 2 vultures exchanged glances. The one carrying the axe began to howl with laughter. "What's so funny?" Marian demanded, starting to get angry. The second vulture shot an annoyed look at his friend. Sorry about him, he said. There's a reason our mama called him Nutsy. He rolled his eyes. The thing is, ma'am, the previous owners don't live here anymore, and this here house is property of His Majesty Prince John of England. What? Marion sputtered, forgetting she was trying to play nice. Prince John can't just take over someone's home. This has been in their family for generations, she paused, frowning. Don't tell me this is about taxes. Taxes? Sputtered Nutsy, still giggling. That's a good one, right, Trigger? Taxes, he snorted, then locked his eyes on Marion. Try treason. Treason? Marion repeated, horrified. Yes, ma'am, Trigger agreed. Robin of Locksley is a traitor to the crown, and because of this, all his family's possessions have been seized. But that's impossible, Marion argued. Robin's not a traitor. He served the king in the war for years. The former king, maybe, corrected Trigger in a haughty voice. But it seems your fox is no friend to His Majesty, Prince John. Of course, Marion realized, a sick feeling settling in her stomach as it all began to slide into place. Robin must have come home after serving King Richard and seen what his successor had done to the kingdom. He must have said something, spoken out in some way, and in doing so he angered the prince. Where is Robin now? She asked, a little fearful of the answer. Is he in prison? Nope, Nutsy replied gleefully. He ran away like the coward he is. I reckon he went to Sherwood Forest, where the ghosts probably got him. Quiet, you, Trigger scolded. His beady eyes settled on Marion. You're asking a lot of questions, but you haven't answered mine. Who are you, and what do you want with Robin? It doesn't matter, Marion said, backing away. She didn't need these two going back to Prince John to inform him of her little visit. I'll just be going. Trigger made a move to grab her arm. On instinct, she swiped his wing away with a bit more force than she'd meant to, succeeding in knocking him backwards. His expression darkened as he scrambled to his feet. He raised his crossbow, putting Marion in its sights. Don't move, he growled. Nutsy, go get the sheriff. Marion froze. The sheriff? She could not let them get the sheriff. She drew in a breath, then yanked her hat off her head, whipping it in the direction of the vulture. Trigger tried to loose his arrow, but it got tangled in the silk of the veil, and the shot went wild. Straight up to the ceiling, lodging in a wooden beam. Why, you, he cried angrily, struggling to free himself from the tangle of silk. Get her, Nutsy. The other vulture charged forwards with his axe. Marion dove towards the door, running with all her might. When she got through it, she kicked it closed with her back foot, slamming it into Nutsy's beak. She heard the vulture bellow in rage as he hit the floor with a loud thud behind her. But Marion didn't turn around to look. She kept running across the overgrown field. A moment later, there was a whooshing sound, an arrow flying close to her ear, missing her by a hair. Her breath came in short gasps, and she picked up the pace, running as fast as she could. She heard the vultures yelling behind her, giving chase. She wasn't going to be able to outrun them, not in this dress anyway. She spotted a farmhouse ahead, one of the serfs, likely, who had worked on the estate. There was a smoke coming from the chimney and a line of wash in the back garden. Marion leapt over the fence and ducked down, trying to catch her breath. Her eyes rose to the laundry above her, a pair of men's trousers and a tunic and a cloak. Impulsively, she grabbed them off the line and quickly exchanged her fancy gown for the new clothes, pulling the cloak's hood over her face. Then she leapt over the fence again and headed down the road. Walking as if she didn't have a care in the world. A moment later, the two vultures caught up to her, panting. Excuse me, fine sir, cried Nutsy. Have you seen a woman come this way? Marion pretended to consider this, then she nodded. She went that way, she said in a gruff voice as she pointed in the opposite direction. You should still be able to catch her if you're quick. Marion felt Trigger give her a suspicious look, but before she could speak, his brother grabbed him by the wing. Come on, Trigger, he cried. You heard the man. Let's go get her. And with that, he took off flying in the direction Marion had pointed. Trigger gave her one last look, then followed his brother down the road. Soon they disappeared. Marion sighed in relief, slumping her shoulders. That was close. Too close. She glanced back to where she had come from. The former grand estate now turned into just another asset for the greedy Prince John. Her heart ached for Robin. He'd given his youth to fight for his country, only to come home to this? To be stripped of his lands and titles and gold and called a traitor? It wasn't right. None of this was. Her gaze traveled from the estate to the forest beyond. Sherwood Forest, Robin's supposed new home. She'd heard stories of the forest. It had haunted. It was haunted. It was filled with cutthroats and thieves. Even the king's men stayed clear of the place, and she'd been warned all her life never to set foot inside of it. But now, what choice did she have? She could go back to the castle, back to her well-appointed prison, or she could try to find Robin, the only possible ally she had left in the world besides Lady Cluck. She drew in a breath and started walking towards the trees.